Hey guys, Troy here from Pacific North Central. I'm here with video 4 of how I build my turnouts, and on this video here we are going to discuss on actually building the frog and getting the frog installed. For this step you are going to need just a piece of masking tape, which I already have a piece right here peeled off, and just a couple more pieces of rail, your point form tool, your solder, and soldering iron. So we're going to go ahead and take the turnout out of its jig. And on this step I use just a solder right up off the spool. And we're going to take and make sure that we insert our rail inside the actual frog end of the point form jig. Once again, this is the same thing as doing up your points. Go ahead and get it so your rail sticks out. Slowly go ahead and pull it back to the top of the rail head, meets the jig. Make sure you're looking at the top of the rail head, not the bottom, the actual base of the rail. You're going to take it, turn it around, do the same thing with the other side, making sure you keep pressure and closing this thing right here up. Do the same thing with the other side. Double check just to make sure nothing slid. This one here is actually out just a little bit. Now we got that right there, and I'm going to double check one more time just to make sure. For some reason I'm just not quite getting this. There we go. I got it right where I want it. Okay, maybe not. Once you got it right where you want it, make sure you keep pressure on the jig. And go ahead and snug up the jig. I'm actually going to go and move this stuff right here out of the way because I don't want shavings up all over everything. And go ahead and make the frog is the same thing as making the points. Making sure that your file is always going in the same direction. Keeping it nice and flat up against the block. The frog is actually the easiest thing to go ahead and do. I'm just going to go ahead and file until it smooths itself out. And you'll feel it stop grabbing up against the rail pretty much. And you want to double check it. There's just a little bit left there. That's feeling pretty good. Do the same thing with the other side. Once again, keeping it nice and flat. Check it. A couple more times here, I think it should be good. That feels pretty darn nice. Take and wipe off all of our filings here. Actually, I'm just going to go and use a different piece of tape here, as I'm sure I got some shavings up on there. Now we're going to do the same thing as what we did here with the points. We'll take the frog up out of the jig. Actually set this aside now. We're just going to take our wire brush and just lightly go ahead and clean up anything that's on there. Double checking for any of them hair-like pieces of rail that's sticking out or anything else. That doesn't look too bad. We'll take our turnout up out of the jig, set it aside. I'll grab a piece of tape here. Get that right there ready to go. Now you're just going to go ahead and take the frog and stick it down inside the jig. And do that with both sides. And when you go to do the frog, you want to make sure that the ends of the rail are actually going up in there nice and even. You want to get it so that the actual points of the rail are just touching. Making sure that this stays nice and flat the whole time that you're adjusting them, and making sure that they're going in nice and even. And you get it so it just touches. You don't want to put any pressure on there, as if one rail head's further over than the other, and that's going to bend the tip of the frog one direction or the other, depending upon which rail is longer, which one is shorter. You'll actually push the shorter one over to one side of the turnout either way. Now I got that in right where I want it. Go ahead and just double check it here just one more time. Get my tape ready to go. Double check it. You want to make sure it's right where you want it at. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the tape, lay the tape across there. All the tape's doing is basically just holding this whole thing right here down, so you can let go of it and it's not going to go ahead and slide back and forth. I'll make sure that that tape is good and sticky up on there. Nothing's going to go ahead and move. You'll take some flux, put some flux up on there, making sure I don't go past this other tie right here, this in between these two ties, because you don't want no solder back past this tie, as that's right where you're going to have to go ahead and cut and isolate your frog, which we'll show that off into a later video. You just go ahead and apply the flux to the top of the rail and inside the frog down there inside the middle. Trying really hard not to go ahead and get any flux on the outside edges of the rails, as that'll go ahead and let the solder and allow the solder to go ahead and go to the outside edge of the rails. It gets to be a little bit tough to go ahead and sit there and file it all down. And I like to actually put the solder on the iron. I do all my electrical and stuff this way. And I'll just go ahead and once I got the solder up on there, I'll just go ahead and run it on down. If I notice it sucks down inside there right away, that's fine. I know it's going to get down in there. I'll just keep on adding solder until I build it up so I know it's higher than the actual top of the rail. If it keeps going down, I'll just keep adding just a little bit at a time. Once I know it's higher, I like to go ahead and try to get this as hot as I possibly can. What you're trying to do here is allow the solder to go down in between the two rails and get to the bottom of it, and actually go ahead and heat up. It'll give you a nice strong bond inside that frog. And just keep working it back and forth, trying really hard not to go ahead and go past that one tie right there. It's going to go ahead and heat it up. I can see that that's starting to suck down inside there a little bit more now. It's actually starting to flatten out. Now I know it's getting down over there to the bottom of the actual frog. Solder's getting down inside of there. Let that cool off there just for a second. Now we're just going to go ahead and take the tape back off. Look at the bottom. I can see I got some solder down there, so that's good to go. I like that. Now you're just going to go and take the file. You're going to lay the file nice and smooth. Don't worry about scuffing up the top of the rail heads. That's no big deal. Now all you're going to do now is just go ahead and file down all that solder that you just laid up on there. And you're going to come down right to the top of the rail heads, keeping the file nice and flat, going all the way across, one stroke at a time. Making sure it stays up on there nice and flat. Once you get down so far, you can actually see the top of the rail head start sticking out from the top of the solder. Once you get it down there to that point, then you'll know. You just keep on watching it as you're going, filing all that excess solder back up over there. And I can just start seeing the one side of the rail over there. I'll use the old finger test. Once I see the two sides of the rail, you use the old finger test Ain't nothing better than going ahead and running your finger across. Just go and see how smooth it really is. That's actually feeling pretty darn good. I like to go and do that at the bottom too. Don't be afraid of filing down some of the bottom of the rail. It's okay, this is just going to help clean everything up. Give it a nice tight bond when you go ahead and go to solder everything on up. It's going to keep it nice and square up against the ties. Once you have that part right there done, I'll take the triangle file. I'll actually look down sides of the rail. There's just a little bit of solder here. That's something I'll probably notice once when I go ahead and paint it. You probably don't necessarily have to do this if you don't have a lot of solder up there, but it's one of them little details that on myself I like to go and clean it up. I don't want to be seeing any of that crap. So I'll take and clean up both sides of it. For me to go ahead and sit down and do this, this takes me maybe 2 minutes to go ahead and do. Not even. That's actually looking pretty darn good. I'll take and just get rid of these shavings here really quick. Now you can actually go ahead and take and install the turnout back inside the jig. Now we're going to go ahead and actually go ahead and install the frog. You notice when you go and you build the frog, there's going to be movement going back and forth. That's good. You want that movement that's sitting up inside of there. So what that's going to allow is going to allow to go ahead and adjust the actual frog. Then you want to go and use your NMRA gauge and actually check the clearances in between the frog and the actual wing rail. I found that most of the time if I'm pulling the frog all the way out as tight as I can go ahead and get it on this specific jig, it works out pretty good normally. You want to check it with the flangeways at the tip of the NMRA gauge. I believe HO is the same way. Making sure that nothing fits up in there nice and tight at all. Once I got it right where I want it, I'll actually look at the little notches on the flangeways, see which way it feels better, which way it feels tighter. The actual tighter side is the side I'll actually hold the NMRA gauge on. When I go to do this, I'll actually just go ahead and do one side at a time. This way here, if I have to go and do any other adjusting, I'm able to go ahead and pull it back out. However, I will get the whole thing prepped with flux and solder, just in case if it's good to go, then I can just go ahead and solder up and be on my way. Stick a couple pieces of solder down onto here. Hopefully I don't lose them or anything. Another thing you want to check for when you're putting in the frog is that your gap is correct at on the very last tie. Whoops. Kind of snapped out on me there. Slide that back up in there. I'm sure it's going to still be the same way with the one side being tighter than the other. As you start building turnouts, you'll realize which side of the jig to go ahead and actually go off of and which side not to go off of. I'll go ahead and just solder one of these, making sure I get it up there in the base of the rail again. Now I'm going to go ahead and just take the NMRA gauge and go ahead and test it, making sure it's not tight up inside of there. That actually doesn't feel too bad. At this point I like to stick the tip of the where the flange ways on the gauge, and stick it right up towards the tip of the points on one side, wherever side's tighter. Even though they're supposed to be both just a little bit loose, I always stick it off to the tighter side. And I'll go on in there and actually finish soldering up the last of it. This is just going to help hold down the actual frog down inside of there. Making sure I get the solder up on there. You don't want to heat up this frog too much. If you heat it up too much, you're going to suck the solder back up out of it again. And then it's going to want to go down there to the bottom of it. And once again, you want to make sure that that one gap that you cut inside this last tie is lining up right here inside the middle. If it's not right there inside the middle, it could create a short circuit. And it's a really tight tolerance in N scale. I don't know what it's like in HO, but I know it's pretty tight tolerance right there in N scale. Now at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and double check it. Make sure that my frog is good. And the best method to go ahead and check your frog is to actually hold it up. And when you look down the rails, you'll actually go ahead and see that they're actually coming through nice and straight. Let's see if I can do this here. Please bear with me. I'm going to try to hold it here so you guys can actually see it. If you guys look down this rail right here, it should be nice and straight, going all the way through there, through that whole section. And if you take and you turn that just a little bit, and you look down this rail, see if I can get that over there again, you can actually see that it's nice and straight going down through there too. Your eyes are going to be the best key to go ahead and make sure that this right here is leveled up. No matter what that NMRA gauge says, you can always go ahead and loosen it to go ahead and get those right there to tighten up. Otherwise that point's going to get too far up in there, and you're not going to have the clearance, and then the back flangers will end up picking that section right there, and then derailing, actually popping them wheel sets back up and over the frog, and derailing and setting them wheel sets right down here inside the middle in between the two rails. You don't want that to happen. That's how you go ahead and you put in the frog. Now I will take and quickly show you guys how to go ahead and put in the guardrails. Now all the scrap pieces that I have cut off for all this track, and even the stuff that comes up off of here, I use as much as I possibly can. I'll just go ahead and make guardrails with everything, so I got less waste. Just something I like to do. Guardrails are really easy to do. So all we're going to do is on this one, the actual length of the guardrail is right here on this jig. Some jigs are in the middle, some are on the other sides. They could be down over here at the other end. It's wherever the company decides to go and put them in there at. So for these, all you do is you just slide this piece down on the side of there. You'll take your rail nippers, just trim it off flush with the end of the plate, at the end of the jig. I'm going to go ahead and cut both of these right here at the same time, since I'm already holding on to it here. Clean up this other end. Making sure that you have a clean end that's cut to go ahead and slide down inside the jig. Then all you do here for this part, it's really simple. All you're going to do is just slide that down inside of the next part, which will be two small little tabs, whoops, on both sides. You're just going to take your little piece of rail, slide it in there, and I don't know if you guys can notice this or not, but there's actually like a little bit of a bend right there. It's not square with the end of the plate. So all you're going to do is make sure it's down inside there, and just give it a little push. Get it so it's nice and straight with the jig, so it's squared up and you got that 90-degree angle right there. Take, flip it on over, stick it into the other side, and just go ahead and do the exact same thing. Now you've got it all nice and square. Now you just went ahead and created a guardrail. There's one. Do it this side. Making sure you get both sides of it. Now you created two guardrails. Now at this point, this is one of the little details that I like to do. Once again, if you're running a video camera on your layout or anything else like that, like I plan on doing, you can actually see like a little ridge when you use your rail nippers on there. And you get these little flanges at the bottoms from right where you cut it at. So what I do is I actually file down the bottom of it just a little bit, because it'll actually create a little bit of a lip. And with that lip on there, it won't sit flat up against the ties. So all you want to do is just go ahead and clean that end right at the bottom side of the guardrail up. And then I like to go ahead and clean up the very ends of the guardrail. I'll file them down so that they look nice and square. Get rid of all that lip that's coming down the center from the rail nippers on both of them. Do that with both sides of each guardrail. That one's nice and clean. Make sure we do the same thing with this one. Go ahead and get the bottom of it. Turn it around. Get the bottom of that one. Clean up this end. Sometimes it takes a little bit more filing than others, but like I said, it's one of them fine little details. It only takes maybe a minute or two. Next we'll take the turnout, stick it back inside the jig, grab a hold of our guardrail. Got one that goes right up over here, and one that goes over here to the other side. Now at this step, I like to use my NMRA gauge for this, because the jig doesn't allow the guardrail to sit all the way down tight up inside the jig for some reason. It doesn't seem like it sits the way it really should. And I'll actually just take the NMRA gauge, I'll stick it down inside of there. While pushing down at the end of the NMRA gauge, then I'll go ahead and be able to go ahead and solder it. So we'll just set that down. Grab some solder, apply it to this side. Grab a hold of a couple pieces of solder here. So here it's all ready to go once I get this thing actually positioned. Make sure I got a nice clean tip. It's all ready to go. Making sure I don't pick up that piece of solder with my fingers here. I'm trying to make sure that these things sit in there nice and flat. I want it as tight up against the tie as possible. You don't want that thing twisting or bending or anything else like that. Once you get it into the spot, just take and give that right there a little touch. You got one side done. This side right here, you can actually go ahead and move just a little bit if you actually need to. I'll actually just turn it around, stick the gauge down inside of there, and we'll go ahead and do the same thing with the other side. Now on these ones, I'll actually go ahead and hold that soldering iron down on there just a little bit. It's okay to go and get the solder, go and run up underneath those. You want it to go ahead and be able to flow up underneath there. If you notice that there's not enough solder there, if you're doing what I'm doing here and just cutting it up into little pieces, then just go ahead and add just a little bit more. Add another little piece right there. You want to make sure it's getting up over there on the edge of the rail, as this is what's going to be grabbing a hold of wheel sets and sucking them up into the frogs and and guiding all them wheel sets. So there's one. We'll go ahead and do the same thing with the other side. Get just a little bit of flex stone on there. Whoops, that was too much, gosh darn it. There we go. I'm just going to go ahead and set that other wing rail down inside of there. The guardrail. Do the same thing with the other side now. Once again using them flange points. Grab a whole piece of solder. I'm getting it soldered down up on there, making sure I get it up and onto that flange. Do the same thing with the other side. Got another little piece of solder here. Stick it down there towards the front. Do the same thing. Making sure I use that flangeway part. Just once again, just go ahead and touch it down up on there. Hold it. Make sure it sucks up underneath. This side over here, I see that it's not enough solder, so I'll grab another little piece of solder right here for this one. Then hold it down on there. And do it one more time. There it goes. Now I'm going to go ahead and just hit these two right here outside edges, making sure that the solder is going up underneath, right where the guardrail sits, going up underneath the stock rail, and then back up over towards the guardrail. You'll actually watch that solder go ahead and suck up through there. You need a little bit more solder, don't be afraid to go and add some. You don't want it like big clumps or anything else like that. You want a nice, smooth running turnout when you're all done. This one sucked it up pretty good, so we're going to add just another little piece of solder to that one. There we go. Now you've actually successfully installed your frog and your guardrails. Now what I like to do is I'll just go ahead and just roll a wheel set going across there. I just like to feel what it's like. This wheel set, this trip pin right here is a little off. I haven't set it or nothing yet. I just like to feel how it rolls going through there, see how smooth it really is. And I'll actually take and twist them trucks up inside there, trying to kind of force it to go ahead and derail without forcing it too much. So I actually twist and try to feel how smooth it actually rolls. I'll twist it coming one way, trying to go ahead and pick the frog, and then I'll twist it back the other way. Just going to make sure to see how nice and smoothly it rolls. And of course I'm pushing a little hard, but it's something I always end up doing on there. I'll take and do the same thing for the other side.